Vanessa, I want a divorce.
I see. Regardless of the reason, I can't live with someone who has cheated. Let's get a divorce right away. I printed out the divorce papers on the computer and presented them to Scott. Sign them now. I'll sign them later and submit them immediately.
I'm sorry for hurting you, but thank you for understanding. We will be happy.
As Scott and Jordan were about to leave, Jordan came close to me and whispered in my ear. It's going to be a life of luxury from now on. Sorry for taking Scott away from you. With that, Jordan showed a triumphant expression and left, arm in arm with Scott. After completing various procedures, Jordan stretched and spoke to me. It's finally over. Well, it's all for the sake of being happy with Scott. And best of luck living a broke life, Vanessa. With a triumphant look, Jordan laughed down at me. I remained silent, and Scott, looking puzzled, joined in the conversation.
Why would Vanessa end up broke if we get divorced?
Huh? Because if Vanessa divorces you, Scott, she won't have any cash coming in because you're the breadwinner and she's a housewife, right? Hearing Jordan's words, Scott burst out laughing.
What are you talking about? We're the ones who are gonna end up being broke, right?
My name is Vanessa. I'm a working housewife. My job is very busy, and I spend a lot of time away from home. Scott supports me, handling all the household chores in my absence. In other words, he's a dedicated house husband, managing all domestic responsibilities. We've been married for only 3 months. Despite being newlyweds and me not being able to help much with the household due to my frequent absences, Scott has never complained and always comforts me when I'm tired from work. I truly appreciate him. We had a peaceful marriage until someone came into our lives and turned everything upside down. One day, upon returning home, Scott spoke to me.
Can I have my old pal come over sometime?
That's fine, but it's unusual for you to invite someone over.
I met my pal again after a long time. We hit it off and decided to meet again. I wanted to introduce my pal to you.
Scott smiled as he told me about it, and I smiled back, influenced by his cheerful demeanor. I see. Thank you. I might be able to take next weekend off, so please ask your friend about their schedule.
Alrighty. Thank you, Vanessa.
Looking happy, Scott seemed to be sending a message on his smartphone right away. I've hardly ever seen Scott angry or in a bad mood. I love Scott for his kind and honest nature and his carefree smile. Scott's childhood friend's name is Jordan, and he was available to visit us the next weekend. This person meant a lot to Scott. It's clear that Scott's old pal must have been a fantastic childhood friend of his. I was also looking forward to meeting Jordan. The next weekend arrived. Today, Jordan was coming to visit our home. Scott's been busy in the kitchen since morning, making all kinds of tasty treats for his friend from way back. Scott's domestic skills were impressive, especially his cooking. Delicious-looking dishes were lined up on the table. Surely, Jordan would be pleased.
Jordan seems to be nearby.
Saying that, Scott left the house to meet up with Jordan. Our home is in a high-rise apartment with a concierge always present at the front entrance. To avoid confusion for our first-time visitors, we make a habit of personally greeting them upon their arrival. I wonder what kind of person he is. As I eagerly await their arrival, I hear the front door open.
Come on in.
Thank you for having me. When Jordan entered the living room, I was surprised. Wow, what an amazing room! It's so luxurious. I saw this woman looking around the room with a curious gaze. Scott, this person...
Let me introduce you. This is my childhood friend, Jordan. Jordan, this is my wife, Vanessa.
Nice to meet you. I'm Jordan. Oh, nice to meet you too. I quickly greeted her. I was under the impression that a guy was coming because Scott's childhood friend was named Jordan, which could be a girl or a guy. I wished Scott had mentioned that his pal was a woman. With a bit of discomfort, Scott and I decided to entertain Jordan nonetheless. When we moved to the dining table for dinner, Jordan naturally sat next to Scott. But aren't Scott and I supposed to sit together? I thought so to myself, but Scott seemed not to mind. It wasn't a formal setting, and without mentioning it, Jordan deliberately moved her chair closer to Scott.
This house is incredible. The furniture is luxurious too. It's so lovely.
Right? We can live like this thanks to Vanessa.
Oh, really? Looks like you guys have each other's backs as a couple, huh?
Jordan gazed up at Scott, not looking my way at all. I was just staring at the two of them conversing. Watching Jordan, who occasionally touched Scott while speaking joyfully, I felt uncomfortable. Scott didn't seem worried, but I could tell Jordan saw him as more than just a childhood pal. Keeping quiet so as not to spoil the mood, Scott suddenly turned to me and said,
She's great, right?
He truly thought so I answered with a forced smile. Yeah. Surely Scott was oblivious to how I felt. He must think I'm genuinely enjoying this. Then Jordan, who had not spoken to me at all until now, turned to me and said,
I'm really having a great time. Can I come visit again?
Jordan's expression was smiling, but her eyes were not. Seeing my vague response, Scott beamed, saying,
I'm glad you two are getting along.
Since then, Jordan began visiting our house several times a week. Initially, she came on weekends when I was home, but gradually her visits increased, and now she seems to come even when I'm at work. Today, as I returned home, I saw Jordan's shoes at the entrance. I sighed and entered the living room. There, Scott and Jordan sat side by side on the sofa, laughing joyfully. Jordan was intertwining her arms with Scott's. Even after knowing I got back home, they were still glued together, and I was already so worn out, but seeing that just made me feel even more exhausted.
Welcome back, Vanessa.
Noticing my return, Scott greeted me with a smile. Jordan, without speaking to me, just said,
Then I'll be going,
and left the house. Jordan was here again? Isn't she coming too often lately? I spoke with a sigh mixed in. While preparing dinner, Scott continued.
Yeah, she is. But Jordan recently got divorced and moved back to her parents' place. I think she feels lonely because everyone around her is either working or has a family, and she can't see them often.
I feel sorry for her, but honestly, I don't like it when you two meet while I'm not around. It feels like you guys are being too close. I wish you'd understand where I'm coming from. Surely, Scott doesn't have any guilty feelings. He purely wants to help his troubled childhood friend. However, I couldn't feel positive about Jordan, who would casually touch Scott even in front of his wife or barge into a married couple's home during the day. Scott apologized and promised to cut down on hanging out with Jordan after I asked him to. For now, I had no choice but to trust Scott's words. But Jordan kept coming over to our house. She always showed up when I was at work, so I never ran into her. So why did I know about Jordan's visits? Whenever she visited, she would leave her perfume smell in the living room. It was pretty obvious she wanted to leave a reminder that she had been there. It was clearly meant to annoy me. She's not coming over as often as before, but she still comes by every week, so I once again voiced my concerns to Scott.
I told her clearly, but when she starts crying at the entrance saying things like, it's tough or I'm sad, I find it hard to send her away.
Unable to blame Scott any further, I just asked him to keep asking her to stop from coming over. Scott apologized each time, but the situation did not improve. About a month after Jordan's first visit, she continued to come to our house, and I was mentally exhausted. I wanted to stop Jordan's visits somehow. With that thought, I headed to a place I normally wouldn't go alone. That was Scott's parents' house. Perhaps since they're childhood pals, there might have been interactions between their families. I thought that might be a way to find a solution. I pressed the doorbell of my in-laws' house, though I was reluctant to do so. There's a reason why I usually stay away from here.
Oh, Vanessa, it's just you?
It's been a while, Pam. Seeing me alone, my mother-in-law, Pam, opened the door and immediately looked displeased. The reason I don't come over here often was because of Pam. She really hates me.
So, what brings you here all of a sudden?
No particular reason. I just hadn't been able to visit for a while, so I thought I'd say hello.
You coming over here like this doesn't make me happy. I could tolerate it if Scott was with you, but spending time with just you is a waste.
Being faced with such harsh words was almost refreshing. Arguing back would only make things worse. The best strategy was to smile awkwardly and let it slide.
You're such an unlovable daughter-in-law. If someone like Jordan became my daughter-in-law, we could have built a good relationship.
I was surprised to hear Jordan's name from Pam. Thinking it lucky that the topic came from her without having to bring up the issue, I listened. It was like I wasn't even there because Pam wouldn't stop talking.
Jordan and Scott have always been close. She used to say she'd marry Scott. Instead, he ends up marrying a woman who can't even manage household chores properly. I'm truly disappointed.
I apologize for my faults. Without making excuses, I apologized. But Pam continued to grumble about me, repeating,
"He should have married Jordan,"
several times. If Scott and Jordan were to marry, Pam would be happy. With that thought, I absent-mindedly listened to her nagging. It's almost been 2 months since Jordan first came to our place. Her visits continued. It was around the time I started to feel indifferent about her leaving her perfume smell.
Vanessa, there's something important I need to talk about.
Scott, who is always smiling, approached me with a serious expression on this day. The unusual atmosphere made me tense. Yeah, what is it?
Are you free this weekend? I want to have a serious talk.
I'm free, but is now not a good time?
I think the weekend would be better.
After saying he'd appreciate it, Scott left the living room. What could this important talk be about? When it's just the two of us, I thought we had a strong connection. Could this necessary discussion be about Jordan? A feeling of unease started to creep in. I was torn between wanting the talk to be done with and not wanting the weekend to arrive. And the weekend came, and it was exactly what I suspected. As if it was the most natural thing in the world, Jordan was present for the conversation. Scott was the one to start the talk.
Vanessa, I want you to divorce me.
I had somewhat anticipated this. Perhaps our marriage was on the brink of collapse, yet I had hoped he would choose me in the end. To think that our marriage could end so abruptly over just one person when we haven't even been married for half a year, it felt like a blow to the head, leaving me reeling.
I like being relied on. You being busy with work and entrusting me with the household chores made me feel needed. I thought I was supporting you.
I thought so too. That we should dismiss traditional gender roles and support each other with what we're good at and what we like. I thought I was able to do that with Scott.
But this person is helpless. She can't live without me. I need to support her.
Scott truly believes that. His desire to help those in trouble and to support others is sincere. Whether abandoning his wife to help someone else is right, however, is questionable. I looked at Jordan and she didn't seem sorry at all, just lounging on the sofa with her legs up. Clearly, she felt triumphant about finally taking Scott away from me. Not noticing these things might be considered one of Scott's flaws. Suddenly, the idea of seriously worrying about this seemed foolish. Scott's personality won't change. Even now, he must feel some guilt towards me, but it's his spirit of helping others that motivates him. If I think of it as an act of service, I couldn't see a future where he cut ties with Jordan, even if I refused the divorce. Continuing the marriage with Scott seemed like an issue that would haunt me forever, making divorce seem like the quickest solution. I see. Regardless of the reason, I can't live with someone who cheated. Let's divorce immediately. I printed out the divorce papers on the computer and presented them to Scott. Sign them now. I'll sign them later and submit them right away. Scott seemed taken aback by my quick action, but took the divorce papers and started to fill them out on the spot.
I'm sorry for hurting you, but thank you for understanding. We will be happy.
While saying that, Scott handed me the filled-out divorce papers. I silently took them. As Scott and Jordan were about to leave, Jordan approached me and whispered,
"Now it's going to be a life of luxury. Sorry for taking Scott away, okay?"
After saying that, Jordan showed a triumphant expression and left, arm in arm with Scott. She's clearly misunderstanding something, but I didn't feel like I needed to correct her at this point. Regarding the divorce, I decided to hire a lawyer and engage in settlement negotiations. Since we don't have children, the main point of discussion would be the division of property. Today, Scott, Jordan, and I were supposed to meet at the lawyer's office to discuss. Scott declared that he would essentially agree to my terms. Jordan wasn't thrilled about that, but it was only natural given they had hurt me. I demanded a fair division of assets that Scott was entitled to, and also sought compensation for their affair from Scott and Jordan. Jordan wasn't happy at the mention of compensation, but her expression softened a bit when she heard Scott would pay the compensation for both. After completing various procedures, Jordan came over to chat with me.
"Finally, it's over. Well, it's all for the sake of being happy with Scott, right? And best of luck living a broke life, Vanessa."
With a triumphant look, Jordan laughed condescendingly at me. I didn't respond, and Scott, looking puzzled, cut into the conversation.
What are you talking about?
"Well, because she's divorcing you, Scott, right? She's gonna be broke from now on. That's why I thought she'll end up eating nothing but cheap beans to save money. How pitiful."
Why would Vanessa end up broke if we get divorced?
"Huh? Because if Vanessa divorces you, Scott, she won't have any cash coming in because you're the breadwinner and she's a housewife, right?"
Scott fell silent for a moment after hearing Jordan's words. Then suddenly he burst out laughing.
What are you talking about? We're the ones who are gonna end up being broke, right?
"What?"
Jordan looked bewildered, glancing back and forth between Scott and me. I chose not to join in the conversation. Scott, holding his stomach, desperately continued.
I told you, Vanessa is a CEO. I never said I was the one working, did I?
"You did say that, but I thought it was a joke." "That's true?"
Why would I joke about that? I'm the house husband, and Vanessa was the one working. She's the CEO of the well-known ABC Corporation.
Hearing the company's name, Jordan turned sharply towards me.
"ABC Corporation? The one that's in the news with annual sales of $1,500,000,000? That famous one? You're joking, right?"
I'm honored you're aware. Allow me to introduce myself again. I'm Vanessa, the CEO of ABC Corporation. I took out my business card and handed it to Jordan. Jordan, dumbfounded, slowly accepted it. The business card clearly stated the company name. Jordan's hands were trembling.
"How could this... But Scott, your mother was saying you're the one who was earning a lot. How is this possible?"
Hearing this, Scott's expression turned to one of surprise. I figured out that Jordan and my mother-in-law were up to something, but I just kept my mouth shut and eavesdropped on their chat.
Mom also misunderstood. Didn't you tell her, Vanessa?
"Because your mother said it's unthinkable for a woman to earn, and that a woman should do all the household chores, saying not fulfilling your duties as a wife is the worst, among other things."
What? That's ridiculous. She's so old-fashioned.
Scott sighed, clearly exasperated with his mother's mindset.
But I chose you over Vanessa, Jordan. It's not about the money, it's for love. You understand, right?
While Scott spoke smilingly at Jordan, she remained stunned, seemingly unable to comprehend the conversation. Can we conclude our discussion here? You've agreed to the terms, right?
Yeah, this concludes our procedures. I feel bad for hurting you, Vanessa. We'll keep our distance from now on.
Good. Please make sure the person over there and your mother also stay away from me.
Understood. Then, we'll be leaving.
Scott supported Jordan, who seemed too shocked to walk on her own, and they left the lawyer's office. The look on Jordan's face when she found out her now husband was a house husband was priceless. Whether they can build a good relationship moving forward is highly doubtful. However, that's no longer my concern. Finally free from the hassle, I felt a weight lifted off my shoulders. Going back to being single again, I was leading a carefree life, busy with work, when one day my secretary reported that a woman was causing a commotion at the entrance, demanding to see me. It didn't seem like it was an issue related to work, and despite our employees' attempts to talk to her, she stubbornly insisted on seeing the CEO, leaving my staff perplexed. Although I had a gut feeling, I had my secretary lead the person to the waiting area and stay by my side throughout the meeting. As expected, Jordan was there in the reception room, visibly agitated and out of breath. I slightly regretted giving her my business card the other day. "What brings you to my company all of a sudden? And don't you realize that causing a scene at the entrance is a nuisance?"
Well, I don't know your contact details, and when I tried going to your house, the concierge stopped me at the entrance and wouldn't let me in. I had no choice but to come here because I needed to talk.
"We settled everything during the last settlement negotiation, didn't we? I never wanted to see you again."
I didn't come here because I wanted to.
Jordan slammed the table, causing my secretary to frown, but I gestured for her to stay calm.
Yes, that's right. I came here to complain to you.
Complain to me?
Yes, you said we settled the property division, but what's with that amount? For a major corporation's CEO, you sure are stingy.
Jordan rambled on rapidly, clearly distressed. "I'm not being stingy. That was a fair amount."
Oh, stop joking around.
"It's the truth." Realizing she wouldn't back down easily, I decided to explain the situation. First of all, my marriage with Scott lasted only 6 months. I split my earnings from that period evenly. After Scott paid for both his and your compensation, it's natural that the amount you received was less than what was expected. Hearing about the compensation made Jordan pause. Scott had paid the compensation for both himself and her. Realizing why several tens of thousands had vanished, Jordan looked frustrated.
Even so, why can't we live in that high-rise apartment? The house and the furniture, they're all marital property, aren't they? It's unfair for you to hog it all.
Dealing with Jordan was becoming exhausting. I explained calmly, albeit reluctantly. "I recall feeling uncomfortable when you first visited our home, looking around. Indeed, if we had purchased them after getting married, they would be considered marital property, as you mentioned."
What do you mean?
"The high-rise apartment and all the furniture inside were bought by me while I was single. Hence, they are entirely mine. There was never any chance for you to live there." Faced with the harsh reality, Jordan was visibly shocked and muttered almost inaudibly.
I thought marrying Scott would give me access to wealth, the high-rise apartment, and all the luxurious furniture.
"I hate to break it to you, but you were wishful thinking. But on the bright side, you have a loving husband who's a pro at doing chores. Embrace it."
That's it! That's the problem!
Hearing my words, Jordan seemed to snap back to reality and raised her voice. "What now?"
Scott told me to work. He said I'm suited to be a house husband, so Jordan, you go out and earn. I married Scott thinking I wouldn't have to work and could live comfortably.
One would naturally assume that if one partner stays at home to handle household duties, the other would work. In Jordan's case is peculiar, but in this context, Scott can't be faulted for expecting her to work. His ability to be a house husband was possible because of our arrangement where I was the one working. If you wanted a partner who enjoys working, someone like Scott who takes care of the household wouldn't be ideal.
I've never really worked, having lived at my parents' all my life. I'm just doing part-time jobs now, unable to become a full-time employee, so I can't earn a stable income. Scott doesn't get mad, but he says, with my cooking skills, we can easily live off budget meals, so let's save money together as a couple. He's being all positive saying things like that, and it's annoying.
I see. That might be a bit troublesome. Scott's ability to take everything positively is a strength, but his lack of sensitivity can be irritating.
Even if we live only on beans. As long as we're together, it's fine. I have the cooking skills to make beans exciting every day. He keeps saying that. I was happy thinking you'd struggle with your life. If I knew it would be like this, I wouldn't have married Scott. I don't need a man like him, so you should take him back.
Jordan's irritation likely stems from not being able to live the luxurious life she envisioned. Being forced into a frugal life with a wonderful but financially unsuccessful husband is a result of her selfishness. Blaming me and venting on me might be her way of coping, even though it's all her fault. I couldn't care less about how you feel, and I don't need a cheating man either. Is that all you wanted to say? If so, please leave. With that, my secretary promptly called security without waiting for Jordan's response, escorting her out. I could hear her protesting in the hallway, but her voice faded away. Thanks to my secretary's quick thinking, I was able to avoid dealing with that person. I let out a sigh of relief, glad to be done with the situation. Since then, there were no more surprise visits from Jordan, and I was able to focus on my work peacefully. Just when I thought I could leave work early without overtime, I was suddenly grabbed by the arm. Startled and fearful, I slowly looked to find Pam glaring at me with fury.
You finally came out. I've been waiting for hours and you never showed up. How could you not let me in and just turn me away? What kind of nerve do you have?
Jordan was one problem, but I had forgotten about another troublesome person, Pam. Waiting for me to leave the company, her relentless persistence sent shivers down my spine. I responded firmly, hiding my discomfort. Scott and I are divorced, so we're strangers now. It's obvious I wouldn't let unrelated people into my home. I've made sure the building management knows only those I approve can enter.
How dare you? Respect your elders.
Her screech was unlike anything I'd heard before, and utterly unpleasant. I would, if there was anything respectable about you, but there isn't. Now, why are you here, especially if you had to ambush me?
How dare you? I came all this way because I have something important to tell you.
I didn't ask for it. I wanted to run away from her right then, but I feared she'd ambush me again in the future. Determined to end this once and for all, I decided to listen to what she had to say.
Why didn't you honestly tell me Scott wasn't working? Because of this, I'm suffering now.
I told you multiple times. I was working while Scott took care of the home. You were the one who called me a liar or ignored me. It's frustrating to be blamed for her own misunderstandings.
You should have made sure I understood. I started living with Scott and his wife thinking I'd enjoy a luxurious life. But we're not living in a high-rise apartment and we're eating beans every day. I can't stand it.
So you are after the money too. Like Jordan, you suffer because you rely on others' wealth.
Quiet! It's all your fault I'm in this mess. You should pay for my living expenses for life.
That's outrageous. You know your husband is still working, right? Even if Scott and Jordan aren't contributing, you should manage for the time being. My father-in-law John has been on long-term business assignments for many years and rarely returns home. Nonetheless, I've had the opportunity to meet him several times a year, and he has always been very kind to me. Dealing with Pam's nagging was bothersome, but thanks to John, I could bear visiting the in-laws' home.
Well, that's...
She hesitated in her response.
When John came back the last time, he found out about Scott getting together with Jordan, and he divorced me. He even kicked me out of the house, so I decided to live with Scott and his family.
It's natural for him to ask questions if he returned after a long absence to find his son's wife had changed. Knowing Pam, she probably spoke ill of me, making John uncomfortable.
But even after separating from John, I thought living with Scott, who I believed was wealthy, would allow for a luxurious life. So I boldly cut ties with John. Now I can't even ask for his help.
I'm truly appalled. John was a compassionate man who treated me kindly. If you had reciprocated his feelings, he surely would have offered you help. However, your current situation is the result of neglecting those around you. Don't expect any help from me. Although Pam appeared somewhat contrite, my firm refusal to help turned her expression back to one of anger.
How terrible of you! I can't believe I had to beg you for help.
And say what you will. If you continue to cause a scene, I'll call the police. You're causing a disturbance in front of my company." At the mention of the police, Pam got pale. Biting her lip in frustration, she left without another word. She left with her shoulders hunched over, overwhelmed with despair. From what I've heard through the lawyer, Scott, Jordan, and Pam continued to live together as usual. Scott, who had wanted to remain a house husband, realized they couldn't make ends meet on Jordan and Pam's earnings alone and began looking for work. However, Scott could only find employment at a low-paying company. Ultimately, Scott's salary alone wasn't enough, forcing Jordan and Pam to take up part-time jobs to barely scrape by. When Scott managed all the household chores, their home was immaculately clean, and homemade meals graced the table every day. Now, overwhelmed with work, their home is in disarray, relying on pre-made meals, and arguments have increased. On the other hand, I'm enjoying a leisurely lifestyle. Hiring a house cleaning service keeps my place tidy, and there's no shortage of delicious meals from delivery or dining out. Besides, I don't hate cooking, it's just that I'm too busy to do it often. Cooking occasionally as a change of pace isn't so bad. I'm relishing my carefree single life. As for work, a new business deal introduced me to John's company, allowing us to meet again.
"Vanessa, I'm truly sorry. My stupid ex-wife and son have hurt you. No amount of apologies could suffice."
He apologized to me, but there was nothing John did wrong in this situation. Please, don't apologize. Although we're no longer family, I hope we can maintain a good relationship moving forward. With that, John smiled slightly and thanked me. For now, I've had enough of relationships. I'm determined to devote myself fully to my work.